Just 8 months after the OM7P, DJI has released the OM8, and I think that was necessary because DJI has added some really important features to the Osmo Mobile 8. In many ways, the DJI OM7P was simply no longer the best smartphone gimbal on the market, even though DJI is still the market leader. With the OM8, DJI certainly wants to catch up with what is currently perhaps the best smartphone gimbal, the Insta360 Flow 2 Pro. Today we'll take a look at whether they've succeeded. I bought the DJI Osmo Mobile 8 with my own money, so if it has any weaknesses, we'll find out today. There are 10 categories that determine the quality of a smartphone gimbal. Take a careful look at all 10 categories if you want to decide between the two, because they are all important and interesting. At the end, I will tell you who I would recommend which gimbal to. Let's take a look at the design. And by that, I mean the aesthetic design. The OM8 looks identical to the OM7P. It's almost impossible to tell them apart. In comparison, the Flow 2 Pro looks more modern. The control elements alone give it a more minimalist and elegant appearance. At the same time, the Flow 2 Pro also has a few playful design elements that simply make it look more interesting and modern compared to the OM8. But that is of course a very subjective opinion, and I understand if you see it differently. The handle is similar in length and both gimbals are comfortable to hold. Both gimbals are similarly easy to use. If you have used a smartphone gimbal before, you will quickly get to grips with both. The buttons largely fulfill similar functions. For example, the trigger button on the back. As we have already seen, the controls on the Flow 2 Pro are much more minimalistic, even though everything you need is there. On the other hand, the joystick on the OM8 is somewhat better defined. What I have wanted from DJI for a long time is a new zoom wheel. I constantly bump my finger here unintentionally and change the zoom factor without meaning to. Personally, I prefer the Flow 2 Pro overall, but as I said, that's mainly a matter of taste. It is interesting to note that the technical design of the two gimbals is very similar. Both gimbals can be activated in the same way, by simply folding the gimbal arm upwards. This means that both gimbals can be activated and unfolded quickly and easily. And with both, the clamp can be left on the gimbal when stowing away. The tripod feet can be pulled out of the handle on both gimbals. This is a little quicker with the OM8, because you can pull them all out at the same time. However, the feet are a little shorter and it can sometimes get stuck when pushing them in. And more importantly, the Flow 2 Pro stands much more stable and cannot fall over so easily. Just like the OM7P, the OM8 stands anything but stable. I don't understand why DJI hasn't improved this. On both gimbals, an extension rod can be pulled upwards out of the handle and bent by up to 90 degrees at the top end. In addition, both are similar in weight and size, whether folded or unfolded. There are therefore hardly any relevant differences in this category. The Flow 2 Pro and the Osmo Mobile 8 both come with the usual shooting modes. A follow mode where the tilt axis and pan axis move, a pan follow mode where only the pan axis moves. So the gimbal does not move up and down but only sideways. And an FPV mode, which not only allows movements of the pan and tilt axis, but also of the roll axis. You can therefore also perform lateral rotational movements. The OM8 has two modes in this context. In FPV mode, the smartphone follows your hand movements, including on the roll axis. In spin shot mode, you perform the turning movement with the joystick. With the Flow 2 Pro, on the other hand, you perform the rotation in FPV mode with the zoom wheel. Two separate modes are therefore not necessary. However, zooming is not possible in FPV mode. If you don't want to worry about the mode at all, you can also use the automatic mode on the Flow 2 Pro. Depending on the movement pattern, the gimbal then decides which movement it will follow and which it will not. Both gimbals also have a lock mode in which all axes are balanced, but only the Flow 2 Pro has the so-called Active Plus mode, a kind of turbo mode that enables particularly fast movements. In this category, there are therefore slight advantages for the Flow 2 Pro overall. And now we come to a very interesting category, range of motion. It's interesting because DJI has clearly improved the OM8 in this category compared to the OM7P. The OM8 can now rotate horizontally, in other words in the pan axis, completely by 360 degrees. Just like the Flow 2 Pro. This is very useful because it allows you to simply set up the gimbal in the middle of the room and let it track you around, without having to worry that the gimbal will eventually reach its movement limit. This means that the OM8 has caught up with the Flow 2 Pro in a very important area. However, the Flow 2 Pro still leads the way in the other axis. It can still rotate much further than the OM8 in the roll axis, that is when turning it sideways. In the tilt axis, both gimbals are similarly limited. They cannot be moved up and down very far. Why should that be a problem? If, for example, you are filming in flashlight mode or taking a cinematic crane shot from the very bottom to the top, this restriction can be a problem because the smartphone rotates with the movement when the gimbal reaches its movement limit. A straight crane shot is hardly possible. However, the Flow 2 Pro has a special feature in this regard that distinguishes it from the OM8. Only the Flow 2 Pro features the so-called free tilt mode. For this, you pull out the stick and can then turn it 90 degrees to the left. And now the Flow 2 Pro also offers unlimited range of movement in the tilt axis, and the smartphone can be rotated completely around its own axis, which now enables a completely straight crane shot, for example. This is a cool feature that especially experienced users will appreciate. It's interesting that DJI has not included anything comparable here. Yes, of course, the main function of a gimbal is and remains stabilization. While the shots of a new iPhone, for example, are already well stabilized internally, a gimbal simply enables smoother movements and more cinematic shots, especially with longer camera movements. And when it comes to stabilization, there is hardly any difference between the two gimbals. Manufacturers have been reaching their limits here for some time now. Both gimbals stabilize the shot well and do what they are supposed to do. Although beginners in particular should know that no gimbal can compensate for up and down movements when walking. You still have to try to compensate for these movements by walking properly. By the way, I used music from MusicBed for this video. The video is not sponsored by MusicBed, but a few weeks ago I decided to switch to MusicBed and a friend of the brand program, simply because I think MusicBed offers the highest quality songs. Yes, I know, everyone says that, but just listen to it. I'll put a link in the description. You can try the service for free for 2 weeks and form your own opinion. While there are hardly any differences when it comes to stabilization, it's a different story with the second main function of a modern smartphone gimbal, tracking. To be able to use all the tracking features, you need to use the respective manufacturer's app with both gimbals. This is the only way to get the best possible tracking performance. And for this, you don't need the AI tracker from Insta360, which is sold as an accessory, nor the multifunctional module of the OM8. Tracking in the app works excellently and very efficiently with both gimbals. Both gimbals are very responsive and recognize the subject even if it has been lost for a longer period of time. Both gimbals allow you to correct the framing when tracking using the joystick. And both gimbals can also track objects, at least in the respective app. But the Flow 2 Pro has a few unique features when tracking in the app. Only the Flow 2 Pro allows you to set the correct framing right from the start. You can define the optimum position of the subject using the framing grid. The subject is then always kept in the top right-hand third, for example. And this also applies to the following shots. You don't have to adjust the framing using the joystick. This can be very useful, especially if you're filming yourself with the back camera and cannot even check the framing. With Tracking Plus, only the Flow 2 Pro offers a tracking feature for use on the tripod, which increases the field of view by switching off the internal stabilization and further improves tracking efficiency. And as you can clearly see here, the Flow 2 Pro with Tracking Plus is clearly superior to the OM8 when used on a tripod. The follow speed was set to maximum on both gimbals. Both gimbals can track a subject even at higher zoom factors. The Flow 2 Pro has its own feature called Active Zoom Tracking, which is designed to improve tracking in such situations. But the OM8 also has a feature called Dual Lens Boost, which allows the telephoto lens and the wide-angle main lens to work together to track fast-moving subjects. This means that both gimbals can track well even at high zoom factors. But only the Flow 2 Pro can dynamically adjust the zoom factor to the distance, as when the subject moves closer or further away. And only the Flow 2 Pro is capable of group tracking, that is, tracking entire groups of people so that individual members are not cut off at the sides. I don't think all these features are equally important. It also depends on your needs. But the framing grid and Tracking Plus in particular are two very useful features for me. And the Flow 2 Pro has another very useful feature in this context. It has a green ring light that lights up when a subject is actively being tracked. At least if you're using the DJI app, you cannot see whether a subject is being successfully tracked with the OM8 when using the rear camera. Tracking in the app therefore clearly goes to the Flow 2 Pro for me. But what if you want to track subjects but still want to use the native iPhone camera app or a video conferencing or social media app, for example? There are two solutions for this, and one of them is Apple Dockkit. That's the integrated tracking technology from Apple. And here too, DJI has finally caught up with Insta360 with the OM8. Unlike the OM7P, The OM8 supports Apple Dockkit, just like the Flow 2 Pro. With Dockkit, the gimbal connects to the iPhone via NFC and can then track a subject outside of the DJI Mimo or the Insta360 app and without additional trackers, at least in all apps that support Dockkit. For example, in the Apple Camera app, social media apps such as Instagram or TikTok, or video conferencing apps such as Google Meet or Teams. Both gimbals support tracking in these apps via Dockkit, even without additional trackers. But Dockkit has a few weaknesses. Tracking with Dockkit is not as responsive as in the manufacturer's apps, and Dockkit is not supported by all apps. And this is where the hardware trackers come into play. And this is where the DJI OM8 has an advantage, because the multifunctional module for the OM8 is included in the standard packaging. There is also an AI tracker for the Flow 2 Pro, but that's an accessory and must either be purchased separately or as part of a bundle for an additional $20. Both trackers work well, enable good and fast tracking of the subject, and of course also work with Android smartphones and independently of the app with which you want to use the camera of your smartphone. Both allow you to control the camera from a distance using hand gestures, and both also have an integrated spotlight to improve the exposure in low light conditions. In direct comparison, they both have advantages and disadvantages. The multifunctional module of the OM8 not only allows you to start and stop a recording, you can also adjust the position of the subject in the framing from a distance, even if this only works to a very limited extent, because tracking is interrupted in the process, a new position is assumed, and then the tracking is resumed. This means that only a lateral correction really makes sense. An upward correction is difficult to make. It also only makes sense if you are filming with the selfie camera. Otherwise, it's not possible to check the framing, but it's an additional feature. The DJI module also has disadvantages in this comparison. It is attached to the side of the smartphone clip. I guess that has no effect on the balance. But check this out. This is a magnetic phone mount. It attaches magnetically to the back of an iPhone, can be left there, and can also be used as a small stand. It also allows you to attach your iPhone to the gimbal even faster and without a clamp. Perhaps the most useful gimbal accessory. It's available for both gimbals. But as the multifunctional module is attached to the clamp, it is not compatible with the magnetic phone mount. The AI tracker of the Flow 2 Pro, on the other hand, is, because it is connected to the upper USB-C port, so directly to the gimbal head. And both trackers have another disadvantage. They are real energy suckers and can significantly reduce the battery life of the gimbal. But, and that's also important, the multifunctional module from DJI comes with another interesting feature. And that brings us to the unique features of the two gimbals, apart from the differences we have already seen. So which features are unique to the OM8 and which are unique to the Flow 2 Pro? I think perhaps the OM8's biggest strength in this comparison is that the module also has an integrated receiver for DJI microphones. The Mic 2, Mic 3 and Mic Mini are supported. You have to connect the multifunctional module to your smartphone via cable and can then connect it to the microphone. Of course, you can also connect the microphone to your iPhone via Bluetooth, but the audio quality will be significantly worse. When using it with the Flow 2 Pro, you should therefore use the receiver on your iPhone. And as you can see, this actually works without any major problems, at least with my iPhone 17 Pro. When using a Pro Max, this solution is not optimal. You can see this little mirror here on the Flow 2 Pro. It sounds strange, but you can use it to get a pretty good idea of the framing when you're filming yourself with the back camera of your smartphone, which on the iPhone, for example, offers much better quality than the front camera. A small but cool and useful feature. By the way, both gimbals should have a runtime of around 10 hours, without using the module or the tracker. The apps from DJI and Insta360 also come with a range of special features that can only be accessed within the app. In addition to the tracking features already discussed, there are various filters and special recording modes. For example, the Flow 2 Pro has a hoop mode, a live mode and a widescreen mode. The dual view mode was also added recently. This allows you to take a picture-in-picture shot with the front and rear cameras, or even a split screen shot. And you don't need an iPhone 17 for that. The OM7P on the other hand has a parent and kids mode, or the very interesting story mode, where the gimbal helps you to take very special shots. But, and please correct me if I'm wrong, apart from that, the DJI app doesn't have a single feature that wouldn't also be available for the Flow 2 Pro. Conversely, the Insta360 app has 4 important and useful features that the Osmo Mobile 8 does not have. You can connect the Insta360 app to a second smartphone and control the Flow 2 Pro from a distance. You can also see a preview image on the screen of the second smartphone. This can be very useful for solo creators and works with any smartphone, not just iPhones. The Insta360 app comes with an integrated teleprompter feature, and you can also take 360 panel photos with the Flow 2 Pro. So 360 photos like with a 360 camera. And also very important, only the Insta360 app supports recordings in ProRes and therefore in log. This can be very important for some filmmakers. With the Osmo Mobile 8, you have to use a different app for this and rely on the hardware tracker. And there's something else you should know. During my tests, the OM8 was unusually unstable. The image froze, there was a bright flash, and once I couldn't change the shooting mode. But I hope most of this will be fixed with an update. Okay, which smartphones are the two gimbals compatible with, and how much do they cost? Both support similarly sized smartphones, and both support a maximum weight of 300 grams. Even though I think the OM8's clamp has been slightly modified compared to the OM7P, it does not support larger or heavier smartphones. In contrast to the OM8, the Flow 2 Pro also supports somewhat smaller and lighter smartphones. Both gimbals cost $159. You can find links to both gimbals in the video description. If you use the link for the Flow 2 Pro, you will also receive a magnetic phone mount worth $20 as a free gift. So which gimbal should you choose? Both are very good smartphone gimbals, and when it comes to the basic functions, both are a good choice. And with the OM8, DJI has caught up with the Flow 2 Pro in two aspects: Apple Dockkit and, what is even more important to me personally, 360-degree rotation in the pan axis. The Flow 2 Pro still has a number of unique features, for example the free tilt mode for full rotation in the tilt axis. Overall, it is the better gimbal for tracking, as it supports group tracking and can track more efficiently on a tripod thanks to Tracking Plus. It also looks better and has many additional features. On the other hand, the OM8 comes with the multifunctional module in the standard package, which has an integrated receiver for DJI microphones. So if you have such a microphone, that's an advantage. But the Flow 2 Pro still has a number of useful and unique features that distinguish it from the OM8. You can find a detailed tutorial on the Flow 2 Pro on my channel. A tutorial for the OM8 will follow soon. So give me a like as feedback if the video was interesting for you. Stay tuned and see you next time.